Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide. I'm Lord Forwind, and today we're going to be talking about 10 tips on how to play Nurgle better. Tip 1, and probably easily the most important tip for this faction, use plagues as much as you can. You can cast them on both your settlements and on your armies, but with all the plagues, this is the true strength of Nurgle. You have plenty of plagues. Some, of course, are much better than others. The money-making one, the infection one, and more importantly, the corruption one, which is usually this one, make a world of difference. They allow you to punish enemies. You're defensive, you're offensive. It all revolves around the plagues, basically. In order to be a great faction, you need to use plagues. The more you use them, the more you will unlock various other stuff, some of which will be amazingly powerful. Also, don't forget you actually have full recipes down here that have kind of special effects. But get plagues, use them. You should always have one, maybe even two or even three plagues running. The hardest part can be to make sure you get infections, so just remember you can spread plague in your own land to gain infections. Tip 2. Nurgle is a tank faction, as in most of their units have a boosted amount of hit points. That's due to the mark of Nurgle. Increased hit points and melee defense, reduced physical attack, and they apply poison. What this means is your units are meant to out-tank the enemies, and one of the way that happens is by using the various Nurgle casters, using the Child of Nurgle ability, which is every time you cast a spell, everyone in an area, which in this case, because of Child of Nurgle, is the whole area, gets healed for 1% of their max health. What does this mean, though? Flame is your greatest problem. Anything that stops healing effect, of which flame is the obvious one, is your big problem. This means factions that come with flaming weapons, like the High Elves Kalidor faction, can have flaming weapons. The Ornite faction can have flaming weapons, or anyone who shows up with a flame mage has flaming weapons. Those are your greatest threats as this faction, so just be aware of it. If you see someone with flame weapons, you may need more units than you expect to beat them. Tip 3. Nurgle is a charge faction, by which I mean a faction that has to charge, wants to, and needs to charge into the enemy in order to do combat. You are mostly lacking in range and non-magic units completely. You do have some that you can get that have some range ability, like the Soul Grinders, which are strong, as well as your Plague Drones. Don't even bother with the Horsemen of Nurgle. So you can have some that have range, but by and large, your only range damage is spellcasting. So this means you need to get into contact with the enemy relatively quickly. Sadly, Nurgle's armies are slower than most. They just are rather slow. You want to close with the enemy as fast as you can and fight. Unusual for a charge melee combat faction, your units are tanky, which we've already talked about. Focus on the healing. Don't expect to kill the enemies very quickly. You're going to want to use flanks and magical spells to really kill units efficiently, especially early game. Tip 4, to continue along the topic of tanky units, Nurgle has a few units that deal damage. You need to use them. Otherwise, your army will, in fact, struggle to kill anything. So, obviously, we've talked about magic is very strong. Your exalted heroes are also right up there. You also have access to the spawn of Nurgle. Now, obviously, spawns are not the strongest units in the game, but for Nurgle, they might be one of your higher damage dealing ones. You've got Pox Riders. You have these War Shrines, which the biggest advantage of the War Shrine is it keeps your demon units in fray and healing. It's not a killing unit, but if you station it around your killing units, it makes a great difference. Nurgle actually has some pretty good beast units, monsters. The Great Unclean One in particular, as well as your Soul Grinder. Some of your Chosens of Nurgle can kill things. They're just not going to be on par with the other factions. But outside of that, you're not going to have a lot of kills. Chaos Knights I actually use a lot as Nurgle because they actually can get some kills. But you want to make sure your army can deal damage. I've seen people go into battles with units that, like these Chaos Warriors of Nurgle, They look like they might be able to kill stuff. The reality is they're basically still a meat shield. Most of Nurgle units are meat shields. You need damage dealing. That means plenty of spellcasters and monsters and some cav to actually kill things. The rest of your army can almost be trash so long as it doesn't die quickly. Tip 5. Nurgle, almost more than any other faction I can think of offhand, relies heavily on matching the correct units to the enemy units. If you deploy the wrong Nurgle unit against the wrong enemy unit, you will lose, especially if they have flaming weapons. By which I mean, if the enemy is going to kill your units efficiently, you probably don't want to throw your chaff units into the fray where they're just going to die so fast they're not going to do their tanking job. You have to match units that can stand up to the enemy long enough that they can get healed and stay in the combat while your damage dealers kill things. This means positioning as Nurgle it might be one of the most important things of any faction in the game, which is strange for a tanky faction, but since you struggle with efficient killing, deploying the correct unit against the correct enemy unit really makes a difference. You have to think about where the enemies are, and you might even need to shuffle your units around in battle to tie up the correct units. Nurgle does not win battles one-on-one. They tend to win through numbers, meaning sending your best units against the enemy best units is a good way to get your great units killed. Sending your medium units against their best units is usually a better strategy, while your best units kill all their medium and weak units. It sounds a little complex. You'll figure it out pretty quickly, or else you won't do a good job as Nurgle. Tip 6. Make sure you stagger your economy building so you always have consistent income. So this is something that I get the most questions about on my other Nurgle guide, is making money as Nurgle. So Nurgle units, you build them. They cost a rather large upfront cost compared to most economic buildings. They will stay on this growth for 4 turns and they'll provide a unit. Then they will move to this one where they'll provide that benefit for 4 turns, 5 turns, and then they will repeat. However, the difference between this level 1 building is 50 income and growth versus 300 income and 80 growth. It's 10 times more efficient in giving you money, twice as efficient in terms of growth. When I say make sure you stagger them, don't try and get all of them being built at the same cycle. If you have all your units, all your economic buildings here on 1, 1, and 1, and 1, as they all get to the end here, you'll have tons of money for 4 turns, and then your economy will drop. It's usually a better strategy to try and stagger them a little bit, have a more consistent income. Ideally, you want 1 on level 4, 1 on 3, 1 on 2, 1 on 1. Reality of it, so long as you have some on 2 and 4, or 1 and 3, you'll be in pretty good shape. Try to do that. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but if you're having income problems as Nurgle, that is probably why. Tip 7. Nurgle has a unique recruitment mechanic by which you recruit units, but they're damaged. If you recruit and then consolidate the units, you will get healthy units in 1 turn. Nurgle has the capacity to raise an army faster than basically anyone else in the game, and they do it through a really annoying recruitment mechanic where you don't always have enough units to recruit. But if you have a surplus of them, and the odds are you will have a surplus of Nurglings, what you can do is you can do recruit, click, you'll get them immediately. Then if you go down here, click on them all, hit consolidate, congratulations, you've wasted half of your units you just recruited, but now they're almost all full strength. Great tip, especially if you're on defense and you're wondering how to repel an enemy invasion into your lands. It costs you a lot, but a full army recruited instantly cannot be underestimated in this game. It's your greatest strength. The downside is you need a large pool of units, meaning once you get to a large empire, Nurgle is much easier to play than a small empire. Don't do this tip when you only own like 2 settlements. It doesn't work that well. Tip 8. Nurgle, like the vampires and the Tomb Kings, relies on more armies over better troops. So Nurgle has, of course, a vast variety of units you can recruit to the battlefield. Some of them are ridiculously cheap, like the Nurglings is 88 upkeep versus a spawn of Nurgle, which is 250, or even Plague Drones, which are 300. However, you're usually better having 2 armies of medium to low level units than having 1 army of the best units for Nurgle, just because of sheer the fact that Nurgle relies on sheer numbers and healing, meaning if you bring more troops to battle and you can keep healing them, you can easily outlast one really strong enemy army. Obviously, as I said, proper positioning matters so that your cheap units don't just get slaughtered, but bring more units, bring more armies rather, over better troops. It'll save you both money. Usually you're also going to have a lot more of the cheap units than the super strong units. So it works well with Nurgle. Mistake a lot of people make is try and get the best armies as Nurgle. Doesn't work very well for this faction. Tip 9, and this is one most people should know, but I'm bringing it up again because there's a point to this. Demonic units, demons, die in their place where they fight. They don't run away. Instead, their leadership gets low and they die. Human units rout. So why does this matter for Nurgle? Nurgle actually wants human units, specifically like Marauders of Nurgle and stuff, to rout. The reason is when routing, they would tend to disengage with the enemy, assuming it's not Cav, and get away, meaning you can then heal them, restore their leadership, and get them back into combat. Sometimes as demonic units, since they die so quickly when they lose leadership, they just die before you can heal them back to a level they'll keep fighting. It's not a bad strategy for Nurgle to actually bring a front line of like Chosen of Nurgle here, which are really defensive units, letting them rout at different times, and as they rout, then throwing a cheap unit in their way, in the enemy's way, to tie them down so that you can then heal your good unit, get its leadership back, have it like do a flank, or even just a charge to get back in combat. So just know the difference between those two units. The demonic units are great for bogging down enemies, but the human units routing and ability to be healed and then thrown back in matters more in many ways. And the last final tip is read your unit abilities and use them the correct way. Nurgle, like most of the demonic factions, has various effects around them, and Nurgle more than most. So if you look at the Plague Bearers here, they have 32 melee defense. Okay, so what? Well, actually they have more, because as soon as they engage in melee, they get Cloud of Flies, which adds an additional 9. So this unit, even though it doesn't look the world's tankiest, is actually far more tanky than you would imagine. And there are other Nurgle units that have various bonuses and stuff as you look through them. Some of them cause fear, some have physical resistance, some of them just have entirely like flying and other abilities. But you have to use the Nurgle abilities more than most factions. The abilities will kind of tell you how the unit is meant to be used. It may not, but sometimes it does. If you look at these ones, they'll tell you exactly why they're needed. Read the descriptions, learn the descriptions, and use them the way the descriptions tell you to use them. It should be relatively self-explanatory. If it gets extra melee defense, probably a melee bogged down unit. If it has bonuses towards weakening the enemy, might be better against fighting the enemy's strong units to contain them. Stuff like that. Read the descriptions, learn the descriptions, and have fun with a very complex faction, probably one of the most complex in the game. And that is it for me. Thank you guys all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you have your own Nurgle tips, by all means leave them below, as well as like, comment, subscribe if this has helped you. And I hope to see you all in another Let's Play or a guide. Bye for now.